week. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about some of what's happening in and around us. Um, so last week, we had the unfortunate occurrence of this earthquake in Turkey. And how about we now have a count of 35,000 people lost? And the more I think about that, all I keep thinking about is 9/11, the most catastrophic thing that's happened here in America. And I see our guest is actually here with us already. So I am going to do a quick welcome while we have her sitting listening to us, and then we'll get back to her whole story. But I want to acknowledge a couple of things. Hi, April. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I am being so rude because wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize you were actually on air with us already. And we're going to do a proper welcome. And maybe you could actually join in this conversation with me. Since I have you, I might as well not talk to myself. But 35,000 people lost in a day. Yeah, we're counting the numbers and getting that number a week later, but in a day. That's 10 times 9/11. Can you imagine?
I can. It's so heartbreaking, especially to watch them pull the children out of the rubble, some alive, some not alive, and just seeing the devastation, and it reminds us of our own humanity. And even though we don't know those who are so far away, we can still sympathize and empathize with them.
Absolutely. And I think it goes a lot further than sympathy and empathy. Now I'm waiting to hear, how are we going to activate helping those that are living? How do we help the injured? Because we can't care to the hospitals are damaged if they're even standing. And but we're not hearing about it in the news. Isn't that a little disturbing that we seem to just have skipped along? No one's talking about it.
I think that's the American way when it comes to news. The next news cycle is supposed to make you forget the last. And so I hope that we'll continue to hear these stories so that the US and US citizens individually and as a government will act.
Yeah. Well, here's the whole woman. We are, sounds so cliche, sending them, keeping them in our thoughts and prayers. And as soon as we have identified, excuse me, excuse me, got me all choked up there. As soon as
Yeah.
we can identify the appropriate organization to align with so we can provide help, we'll talk about that. Excuse me.
You okay?
Okay, I'm wonderful. Excuse me. The joys of live TV. So, as we move on a little bit, talking about news cycles, um, yesterday we had historic Super Bowl. Never before have we had two Black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. And then to have the Negro anthem sang and to have Rihanna be Super Bowl. I mean, we just had such a representation, but more importantly, I saw such an effort on the part of the producers to truly represent all of America. And every ethnicity just about was represented. I was impressed by that. And talk about an evolving nation, an evolving country. Welcome, congratulations, America. Welcome to living in a diverse world where we're really starting to look like our communities. And of course, congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. How about that? Two brothers. Excuse me. So many puns there. But anyway, we're going to move on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by this amazing woman that sits with us. She's been a criminal defense attorney for over 23 years. She's out of Chicago, and she's a premier expert, as I said, in US criminal law and, yes, police abuse. She created games such as Justice Junkie. Excuse me. It's a way to use tools, videos, workshops to break down complex legal jargon and help us to communicate with police officers when we have stops. She has written curriculum, board games, street law revolution. She has done just so much. She has presented at Morehouse College, Purdue University, Northwest. Again, we consider it a privilege to have this amazing advocate here with us today on The Whole Woman to really give us her story and talk about what's relevant and what's important and give us some takeaways as to how we can better have exchanges and encounters with law enforcement. She was voted as Best Lawyer of 2021 by the Chicago Reader. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome April Prayer.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you. And I am delighted to so much to talk about, April. So much is going on that I'm like, I'm going to trip over myself and start coughing because I get excited. And excuse me. And I'm going to control myself. But all that I just said, Miss Chicago native, you know, if you look at stereotypical America and we say Chicago, African-American female, we're certainly not expecting, excuse me, the badass that you are, you know? So I am so excited, and we met in very different settings, but I just love what you do and the way you deliver yourself. But April, give me some background. Tell us about yourself. Give me context about family dynamics when you were growing up. What went into the sauce of making the attorney that we see today?
So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. And no, not all, I say this every time I speak, no, not all the south side is the hood. Not all of the south side means you're dodging bullets when you step outside your door. I was raised in a two-parent household. My parents were married until my mother's death 3 years ago, and they were married almost 50 years. Not only that, I grew up in a village of two-parent households where it was very unusual to not have the dad in the home unless he was deceased. So I was surrounded by, lots of love. The entire neighborhood raised us. I considered the people next door my extended family, my second mom and dad. But I personally also went to predominantly white, very wealthy private schools my entire life. That made me the oddball on the block. Some of the kids went to public schools, some of them went to Catholic schools, but I always went to very elite private schools from elementary school all the way up until law school. And my parents came from very poor beginnings. So my dad was a sharecropper's son. My mother was the daughter of a farmer. My mom grew up in Mississippi, my dad grew up in Missouri, but they both grew up picking cotton. They both grew up during the Depression. They both lived through the Jim Crow era, and they were both the first in their families to go to college. So my mom was an educator, and education was extremely important to her. So not only did I get educated at school, I got educated at home, especially on Black authors and Black history and my heritage, because I certainly wasn't getting that in the schools I was attending. So I was surrounded with a lot of love. It was very important for my mom to make sure I was very well rounded. So any type of lesson that was not available to her as a child, she made available to me, from violin to piano to flute to Girl Scouts to ballet. I was involved in everything and anything every day of the week. I was booked, and then I would have to come home and do homework. So it was a fun, loving childhood surrounded by great people.
I just love the fact that you started out with, let's just break this stereotype. This is not the hood. No, we're not, broken, bullet dodging folks. But again, this is what I love to acknowledge and have us recognize. We are a diverse country. We are a diverse people, and none of us are monolithic. None of us are the same. And I just love that you do that. You talked about that and the dual parent home, and God bless your mom's soul. Having lost my mom, I know what that's like. So
Yeah.
God bless their soul, and I hope you're doing well with it. Let's talk a little bit about, other than going to school and then going to school at home, what were some of the things you enjoyed doing as little April growing up?
Well, I'm very craftsy. My mom was as well. And so I loved just creating different things. So I might be sewing throw pillows one day. I might be sewing dresses for my dolls. I might start painting. I might start drawing. So it just really, my creativity moves in cycles. So I would just wake up one day and start painting or drawing. But then my very first love was writing. So as young as I can remember, I had a typewriter and I would sit and type stories. I would also make up songs. So I just loved creating, especially being an only child. I had to find creative ways to entertain myself because I didn't always have access to my friends. I wasn't always able to go outside and play, and I had to figure out how to pass the time.
Are you an only child, April?
Yes and no. So I am my mother's only child. I was raised as an only child. I have a half brother and sister who are significantly older than me. In fact, my half brother has a child, I put in quotes, who's basically a year younger than me. So, and we were all raised in different states. So I always consider myself an only child because I was the only one who grew up in this household with them.
I know, I get that. So I like the fact that you say, I didn't always have access to my friends, because, that strict household that says, okay, you've had 2 minutes of playtime, time for 2 hours of study. I get it. I am only too familiar with that. Now, in high school, help me understand how you were able to balance that rigidity, strictness, discipline from home, and finding your footing, trying to be cool or not so cool, being crafty, arts and craft. How did that show up in high school?
So oddly enough, I was always well liked. So I wouldn't say I was popular, but if somebody had something to say about me, it generally wasn't negative. And so I had lots of different groups of friends. High school was bigger in terms of class size than elementary school. And I was always busy. I was president of this, vice president of that. So I was very involved. So I was on uh, we called it student congress, but it was a branch of the speech team, and I
Ooh.
attribute them to helping me learn public speaking. So I did that. I was on the newspaper again to support and bolster my writing skills. And I also was super active in an organization that still exists. It's called Top Teens of America. And Top Teens of America also pushed me out front, got me doing public speaking, had me running different committees. And so I ended up holding positions there on a local level, a regional level, and on the national level. I ended up being national vice president. And so I was always busy. And that was my mom's thing. She didn't want me to have any downtime. She didn't want me to have any idle time because she knew that I would get into trouble. So I was always either busy with school like after school programs like Saturday college and math and science programs, because initially I thought I would go into medicine, and then also very busy with Girl Scouts, Top Teens, and then my church. So because I was in all these different settings, I got very good at navigating and moving around different groups and adapting to different groups. And I've always said I can have friends who were 3 years old or 93 years old. And I always have, and I've been able to adapt and make everybody feel comfortable in my presence.
So you were being groomed to be an attorney at a very early age.
She actually wanted me to be a doctor, so no, but she just wanted me to have all the things that, I mean, and I say my dad just wasn't as involved in that, didn't care as much about that as she did. She just wanted me to have every advantage that she didn't have. Even if I didn't end up being a concert pianist, she wanted me to be exposed to piano. She wanted me to be exposed to violin. She wanted me to know how to read music. And I appreciate that because it definitely serves me now in being able to balance a lot of different passions.
It's amazing how we find later on that those skills and the adaptability, the dexterity that it required of us as children, how they show up in our adult lives. Because I couldn't play a piano to save my life, but those piano lessons and the love and the appreciation for the arts, that came as a result of that. You can appreciate good music when you hear it, appreciate good dance and theater when you experience it, because it was cultivated in us. And that is just, I think, one of the key things about having a well-rounded childhood. So let's talk about your choice of college. And when did you just recognize that maybe medicine wasn't going to be it, but maybe law?
So probably right around my senior year of high school, I realized I was good in science, decent in science, but I never really cared for math. And I knew that the two went together in terms of pursuing a career in medicine. So I realized my passions were public speaking and writing. So when I looked at colleges, I actually looked for a journalism program. And I think the best journalism program is right here at Northwestern, but I didn't want to stay at home. I knew I wanted to leave the state. I wanted to have different experiences outside of Illinois. So I didn't even explore that. So then the next big thing was a great program in English, and Duke had a great program in English. And so my parents and I actually went on a car tour of colleges the summer before my senior year. We went up and down the East Coast. We went to Howard. We went to Syracuse. We went to too many schools, at least 10 or 12 schools we visited. And I got to spend the most time at Duke. There was a young lady at Duke who had graduated from my high school the year before. So I was actually able to stay in her apartment with her. And that just made all the difference because I got a feel of the Black community there, which is something I was specifically looking for, having been in predominantly white schools for so long. So, and I loved it. And Duke became hands down my first choice. And I never looked back. And I loved my time there.
So you went off to Duke, you majored in English. Tell me about the transition and going on to your higher level of education, postgraduate studies, and when law clicked, registered, and you locked in on that.
Yeah, it never really did. So what happened was I reached senior year, and like I said, again, I continued being president of that, vice president of that. I started my own nonprofit while I was at Duke. I was very busy. And at the end of my time there, I realized I was going to have a degree in English and Spanish. And then we didn't have minors, we had a certificate. So my certificate was in Afro-American studies. And I didn't know what in the real world I was going to do with any of that. So I said, okay, law school sounds like a good option. I have 3 more years to figure it out, not really calculating that that came with a really big price tag. So I said, okay, I'll go to law school. And the transition from undergrad to law school was really hard because in undergrad, we were able to write papers, we were able to have midterms. There was almost always something you could do for extra credit. In law school, there was one exam per class at the end of the semester. And if you messed it up, you messed up that whole course. And your grade wasn't just your grade, it was based on a curve. So it wasn't how well you knew something, it was how well you knew it in comparison to Joe and John and Bobby who were sitting next to you. And so that was just very hard for me. I went to school in DC. I did not like Washington, DC at all. And so that was probably the first time in my life I felt homesick. But
You attended Georgetown, yes?
No, I went to George Washington.
George Washington. Okay, it's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, down the street from Georgetown. And so I just didn't like DC. And so that made it very hard, very lonely. And law school is different in that in undergrad, everybody's forming these families. Like everybody's away from home and you end up being thick as thieves with your roommate or the friends that you make there. In law school, a lot of people are working full time. They have families. They are literally just in and out in that class to get that grade and then back to their lives. And so it was harder to form those type of kinships and relationships, in my opinion. And it just made it a very lonely experience for me.
Oh, so, okay, you graduate law school and did you immediately go to take the bar or did you consider other options for career?
No, I took the bar immediately and I passed the first time.
Well, of course.
I studied my butt off. I had no life that summer. All I did was study and work out and study, and that was it.
Let's talk about the career that started 23 years ago, April, to who you are today, because it's not lost on me that when you're sought after to be a pundit, a legal advisor, a legal correspondent from major networks worldwide as well, that clearly you have crafted your skill and made a name for yourself. Walk us through that path and let's talk about some of the significant things that you're especially committed to today.
So it's been a windy path because I pursue different passions. So as you know, for a number of years, in addition to running my own law firm, I was selling travel. I was in a network marketing company.
Mm.
I don't run from unfamiliar or interesting endeavors that pop up. And so I had that going on. I've written 6 books. That was always, and 2 of them are poetry books. So I was a performance poet for 10 years. So I've always pursued a lot of different interests. And so for me to be called upon by different networks to speak and to break down criminal law on TV has been a great highlight because it's been like a culmination in many ways of my entire career. I loved practicing criminal law for years and years. I created a board game in order to help teens to never have to end up in the criminal justice system. And as a result of that, I started seeking media. And then in turn, media started seeking me. And so then I got to be a correspondent, as you say, and a commentator on different networks like News Nation and Court TV and NBC. And then as a result of that, a local firm approached me about basically being the face of a lawsuit against the major hair industry giants for the link between relaxers and cancer. So back in October, the National Health
Wait a
Institute
minute.
came out with a study.
I just heard about this lawsuit literally maybe like 3 days ago. Someone mentioned it to me and I started digging behind this. And when you mentioned it, I'm like, wait a minute. Are we just now realizing that there's a connection with something that smells so stinky, burns like hell? I'm sorry. Can we say that? Burns like hell, and our health. Talk to me about that. I am really excited to hear about this, and congratulations to you.
Thank you. So there have been a number of studies because, again, I think people suspected that something might be awry, despite the cosmetologist always being told that it was safe. So there was one study that ran in the 90s through 2009, and that linked fibroids to relaxer usage. Even for just 1 year, you doubled to tripled your chances of getting fibroids. And if you notice, women who have relaxers, who are Black, have fibroids at a disproportionate number than other races. And then most recently in October, the National Health Institute gave up their findings after an 11-year study of almost 34,000 women. They said the same thing regarding endometrial cancer. You literally double your chances of getting endometrial cancer if you ever had relaxers for even 1 year for applications. Now, if you were like me, you were getting 6 and 7 applications a year because you were going every 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you saw a little bit of kink or a curl, you were running back to get what we call a touch up. And so there was a time in my life where every woman around me had a relaxer. In fact, it was odd to wear your hair like you have yours now or I have mine now. That was unusual, and it would have kept you from getting a job back then. So it was socially acceptable. In fact, we're still bumping up against that now with the Crown Act not being passed on a federal level. And in 32 states, women are still not safe to wear their hair like yours or mine and be guaranteed a job. So it's a very deep issue with lots of layers. And I'm happy to get the word out that women who have endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer, or fibroids and had surgery can now fight back through the form of this lawsuit.
So tell me the name of the suit so we can really put this out there and get women to look into this and to engage, because I have to tell you, I remember having a conversation with my OBGYN when at 48 years old, for the first time in my life, she, I told her something's not right. Turns out I had fibroids, very small fibroids. And her response was, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Wait a minute. God didn't put them there. They don't belong there. And if I'm 48 and and for the first time have fibroids, then something is awry. The irony is, back then, I used to do a texturizer with that same god awful thing. And with my hair this short and a haircut every week, I could do a texturizer every 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh,
how about that? So I stopped doing that a few years ago, but go figure. And I am so down with this. Let's get the word out. Let's let everybody know, because I remember too, you had a lot to say. You were called upon a lot when we had the cases with George Floyd and prior to George Floyd, the Gray case, we've had so many situations where you were the face and you stepped up and you did it with professionalism, with accuracy, and you stood the course. Tell us how we can find out more about this case currently, and what else are you working on, as if you have time for more.
I do have time for more, oddly enough. So the great thing is women can find out whether they're eligible enough or not by going to hairrelaxerharm.com, hairrelaxerharm.com. It does not matter where they live in the United States because it's a federal lawsuit. So even though we're based in Chicago, we can still assist you. So go to hairrelaxerharm.com. You'll be asked a handful of questions to see if you qualify. But this is not a class action. So it's not like you're going to get that $10 check or $300 check from Facebook. And all you have to do is say, oh, I was a Facebook member. No, this is a little bit more involved. You will have to sign a contract. You will have to give us access to your medical records so that we can look at your individual case along with the experts to tie what happened in your hair to what's happening in your reproductive organs.
So this is more a public service than getting paid, because it's very important that we participate, all of us, because you need the data.
Yes. And then there's no upfront fee. You only pay if we win. And it is an uphill battle. So this is not a slam dunk. This is not a sure thing. And we're at the beginning of that lawsuit. So I'm asking women to be patient. So in addition to that, I still am trying to get into schools with my board game. Here's what my board game looks like. Trying to get into schools because I did build a curriculum around it because yes, kids can learn a lot about the 54 real life scenarios without trauma, without stress, without anxiety. They can play and have fun, but then they need more support. So I developed a 5-part series where I go into schools anywhere in the nation.
Hang in there, April. The game is called Trials and Triumphs.
The game is called Trials and Triumph.
Okay.
There it is on the screen.
Where can we get Trials and Triumph? And then I want you to tell us about it, please.
So you can go to justusjunkie.store, but I spell justice differently. It's spelled JUSTUSJUNKIE because there's a saying, there is no justice, there's just us. So JUSTUSJUNKIE.store to get a copy of the game. And in addition to the game, I built a curriculum to teach children about police searches, to teach them about foot stops, to teach them about being a passenger in a car. What do you do in all these different situations and not panic and not react and not end up in harm's way? And so that's called Street Law Revolution. And I have been teaching that at local schools. And like you mentioned at the beginning, I've done smaller versions of it for places like Morehouse and Southern Illinois University and Purdue University Northwest, and probably 60 different organizations.
April, unfortunately, this is a 30-minute show, but what you have to share with us is, I'm not kidding, because there's a lot to unpack here. And if we were to really start talking about why we even need these tools, it's a whole nother, that's 4 more episodes. But I'd love to invite you back. And I especially want to be able to share with our viewers, how can we stay in touch with you? And where can parents find these games for their children? And maybe institutions and schools can get the curriculum and have you come in and share with them, or maybe, however it works. But we'd like to be able to share that with our viewers. Tell us how they can find you.
So the easiest way to follow me is just to go to JUSTUSJUNKIE on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. It's the same handle across the board. I am most active on Facebook. So you can just send me a direct message and reach out to me there. But Justice Junkie, JUSTUSJUNKIE is my moniker that I use on Facebook.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Black History Month, and we're going to make you a feature on the Facebook page of The Whole Woman and on our Instagram page, because we absolutely, in the spirit of Black history, want to be sure that everybody is checking out justusjunkie.com so we can have the proper tools as to how to interface with law enforcement. Also, we are going to talk about hair relaxer harm.com. We're going to make sure we focus on that for Black History Month, but Women's History Month is right on the heels. So for March, we're going to say, hey, sisters, let's take care of ourselves. Let's ensure we all participate. You need the data, you need help, and we're going to make sure we're here to support you. The Whole Woman is proud to call you a sister and a friend. Welcome to the Love Circle, and congratulations on all you do. Thank you so much for joining us. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, you can see our attorney, April Pryor Esquire. Yes, she is U.S. criminal law and police abuse expert. You can find out more about her 6 books, the curriculum, all the initiatives she's working on at justusjunkie.com. You can also find her on Instagram and Facebook at Just Us Junkie. So we're here for one more episode of Living Life Authentically. But before we go, we're going to share with you our great big news. We're so excited that for Women's History Month, we are featuring 3 amazing, let's correct that. It's justusjunkie.store. And we're going to put that up before we drop off. We're going to correct that, not .com. Excuse me. Thanks for that correction, April. It's justusjunkie.store. Big difference, because we want to be able to access the information and we want to ensure our viewers get that. So we're going to put that up and make sure you get it. We'll put it in our comments as well. It's justusjunkie.store. Excellent.
Yes.
Awesome. Now that we've got it right, we've got to keep it straight to the facts with the attorney here. So we're going to talk about what's coming up in the Whole Woman world, and we are so excited. We have 3 amazing women. It's the trifecta of divas, ladies and gentlemen, that we're honoring this year at Women Honoring Women, March 26, 2023, Sunday at noon at the Capitol Grill in Paramus, New Jersey. Scan the screen and you can find out more of where to get your tickets, purchase your tickets. Our honorees are Dr. Donna Mendez, one of the first, if not the first, African-American woman to be licensed as a vascular surgeon in the United States. Of course, we have Dr. Balpreet Grill-Virk, an amazing woman, Sikh influential woman in the state of New Jersey, in Bergen County. So much more to learn about her. And of course, the indomitable Dr. Glenda Baskin Glover, PhD, JD, and CPA, one of 2 women in the US to hold that title. African-American woman, might I add. She is also the most immediate past international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It's Women Honoring Women on March 26th at the Capitol Grill in Paramus, New Jersey. So be sure to scan the barcode, check us out, and get your tickets at whw2023.eventbrite.com for tickets if you're not able to scan the barcode on your screen. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with Natalie B. McKenzie. I am your host, and I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.